Yeah, so as I was saying, usually the chill streams will just, they won't be recorded so that we can all have our cameras on and everything be, as the name implies, chill, and we can just talk, get to know each other better. Sometimes I will give a presentation, and specifically, I wanted to give a presentation this time about the future of remote work, the trends in remote work, because if you go by what the media says, or what they want you to see specifically, like you can actually read between the lines. You can use the media to read between the lines and actually get the real picture of what's happening. And I'm going to show that's part of my little presentation I'm going to make. But there's like a campaign since last year, I would say, to demoralize people to think that they have to go into the office. But it turns out it failed. Like people held, like it's now going into the office is seen as such an abuse, as so low status that people. I mean, I'm very proud of the workforce of workers in general. People reacted as like most people reacted as I'd rather lose my job than go back to the office, right? Now, if you were not able to do this, right, like it's understandable, right? Not everybody is willing to do that, but enough people were, to the point that the RTO offensive, the return to office offensive, it's pretty much dead, right? Like there's still some inertia for it. You'll still see news like this is what I mean about the campaign, right? Like you hear about Amazon, the cloud service, making everybody go back 5 days in the office. You hear about how Elon Musk doesn't like, remote workers, that sort of stuff. You hear about Mark Andreessen. He's a fan of job stacking, but he was talking. I guess it makes sense that public servants, people in the government, shouldn't be. They should suffer a little bit. They shouldn't have flexible. They shouldn't have flexible work, flexibility. It should hurt you to work for the government. But you have, but more than them, more than like specific personalities. You have like this media onslaught of telling you people are returning to the office, but reality is different, right? Like the entire job market, the entire workforce is not just a handful of companies. Well, they do job. The president does do job stacking in a sense. Well, right now, Trump, he's the president of his own company. He's the president of the United States, and I guess technically you could say that they're kind of like running all the vassal countries, right? Like the president of the United States kind of runs Europe. It kind of runs places like Japan and South America and that sort of, and Mexico, more or less, right? Like not directly, but yeah, definitely. Job stacking. It's one of those things where the bell curve sort of stuff, right? Like where it's like people that have crappy jobs, right? Like in the service industry, like you're working for McDonald's. Oh, you're allowed to have multiple jobs, right? Like you're allowed to like go from McDonald's to whatever, Barnes and Noble to Starbucks, and have like multiple jobs. They're not multiple full-time jobs, right? And it sucks, but you're allowed to have multiple jobs then. And then if you're very rich, if like you're elite, then you're also allowed to have multiple jobs. You can sit on the board of multiple companies, have multiple things going on. But then if you're like in the middle, then it's like, no, you got to marry your employer. You got to be very loyal. But anyway, I digress. I'm getting out of, I'm going on tangents, random tangents. I do that. But anyway, what I wanted to say is that the presentation is today. It's based on actual data. I don't like data, I'm a science and that sort of stuff, but unless it's backed up by, let's say, things that make sense in reality, abstracted from the numbers, not just the numbers themselves, because I actually think it's easier to lie with numbers than with words, because it's the best lies are the ones that are more precise, in a sense, right? Like they're the ones that are, the more precise you are in your lie, the less it looks like a lie. And so I think language has a lot of ambiguity where it's harder. It's like at the same time, it's like it's harder to tell a lie with language than with numbers, but it's easier to kind of like call the bluff of somebody, or actually it's the opposite. It's easier to tell a lie with words than with numbers. To like craft a lie with a number, you really have to do some work, whereas with words you can kind of like, it's not as complicated as making the math fit. But then it's a lot easier, right, to call bullshit unspoken on a number, or it's harder than. Oh my God, I'm getting confused of my opinion. I have to write it down. I'll write down my opinion on why numbers. It's easier to lie with numbers than with words, because I'm getting confused and I'm once again going on a tangent. Anyway, I'll write a fabulous essay on my take. Anyway, the point is that one of the problems that we're seeing with the remote works or the onslaught against remote work is that people, it's a lot harder to find jobs now, including remote jobs. I wouldn't say especially remote jobs, but including remote jobs. It's not because of that there are no remote jobs anymore, or or remote jobs just died. There's a problem in general with the job market right now. Some of you are already aware of my take on it. I'll make it. I'm working on it, like to formalize it a little bit more, and then I'll explain to everybody, what's happened. But anyway, that's why there's this perception of like, oh, it's impossible to find a remote job or a job in general. But the reality is not like the entire job market or those stories in the media don't tell the entire story of the job market. So that being said, I did prepare a little presentation here. So yeah, let me share my screen. Hold on. Let me change the name of the presentation before I share it with you. All right, done. Anyway, yeah, so this is my little presentation that I made. Can you see it? I guess you can. You can see it, right? Okay. So basically, the presentation has a number of statistics. The source for this one and the next one is down here. I'll make a post on the community feed later with all the sources, because I didn't want to clog the presentation, right? But like I didn't make this graphic. Like I'm not making this up, right? So this is from like the Flex Index, which is an index that tracks flexible work arrangements. And as you can see, this is updated data. This is for the year 2024, I think. 2023, the latest, but I think it's updated for 2024. Actually, yes, it is. The next slide proves that it's updated for the year 2024. So here it says that fully remote is only 6%, but notice that they say employees' choice is 26%. That doesn't mean necessarily that the full 26% is fully remote, but it kind of makes sense to add them together, because you can extrapolate, think that if it's up to the employee, most close to 100% of employees will choose fully remote work. And the reason why we can make that assumption as well, I mean, the report kind of tells you, like you can read the full report when I link it, but it has this other this other entire section called structured hybrid, right? So the fact that it's fully flexible, it's kind of like they're letting you know, read between the lines that this is fully remote, like you can add these two percentages together. So we get around a third of the entire workforce for white collar jobs is allowed to work fully remote, right? Like, so and then you have another third, which is a structured hybrid, right? So some remote. So you can see that some remote has 2/3 of the market, fully remote has 1/3 of the market. It's nowhere near a full control of return to office, right? And so and you can actually see that the trend for this, like this other statistic, this is from the same report from the Flex Index. You can actually see how this is like the peak of the return to office offensive of the Blitzkrieg. All right, the RTO war results, 49% in Q1 2023. But look at this, like when you compare it to the second quarter of 2024, it actually went down, right? Like it didn't go up, it didn't keep going up, and that's something that I said. I don't remember if months ago or years ago. I said like, yeah, this is like we're witnessing the peak of RTO. It's only going to go down from here. And we see that that's basically what's happening. And you can see it here as well that actually fully flexible grew, even if it's just by 1%, right? By 1 point, it grew from Q1 2023. So like I said, it's like, or like I've been saying for a while now, that feeling of doom of like there are no more remote jobs are over, it's done, everybody's back in the office. That's people being melodramatic because we were coming from the high of the pandemic, like the absolute peak of work from home, which was like everybody working from home. And so of course when you have like when you are at the peak and then you go down, you have a local a local minimum, you feel like the world is ending. But that minimum, like remote work, was always going to pick back up again, and I'll talk that a little bit later in some slides. This presentation is really short because I hate PowerPoints and I hate droning on about like my stats and that sort of stuff. I think a key number, a few key statistics, a few key numbers, a few key signifiers tell you the full story, basically. So this is from this report, and so that I'm not called biased, that it's like only one report. This is from remember the name, this is the 2024 Global Workforce Report. This is a PDF that you have to download, so I'll just give you guys a copy of my PDF on the community. I'll upload it there. Yeah, so this is just a brief button of all the stats that are there. It says that 73%. They said, of hiring leaders said, this is important, this is why I included this here, they have lost employees to other companies that offer more flexibility within the last 6 months. Right, so what does this tell you? It tells you that we're witnessing what I said, like people would rather lose their job or, try to work for somebody else, like get another job, if they're forced to have more days in the office, if they're forced to return to the office. And this is like a super majority of the hiring leaders surveyed in this one report. It's saying like we're bleeding workers, basically, like we have lost workers, employees. I guess it doesn't say they're bleeding workers, but they say they have lost employees to other companies that offer more flexibility. And this is only natural. And this is also something that I've been saying, which is that yes, you can have like your little advance, you can have your little push of fully remote, returning to the office 5 days a week or however many days a week companies were demanding. But eventually, right, like that's only a short-term gain when people don't really have options. They're not organized. They're not, they're kind of like you hit them with a 1-2 punch, you surprise them. All right, yeah, you won in the short term. Some people went back to the office, as we can see, here in the 49 in the Q1 2023. But then, as soon as people started to basically recover from the blow, fight back, then you start losing. Then it's competitive advantage to have to offer remote work. This is also, as an aside, this trend is why I think job stacking is going to eventually become the norm, because it's so powerful that any employer offering employees the ability to do job stacking openly, meaning that you don't have to scurry around or like be sneaky about it. I know some employers right now say they do. They if you disclose it, they allow it, and I advise against disclosing it. But that's because the entire, let's say, the entire societal norm hasn't changed, right? Like it's like a couple employers offering that, so it's not as safe. But when it's more of a social change, then yeah, it'll be like everybody will be able to have multiple jobs, flexibility. That's the new trend in flexibility, right? Like first, it's like we defeat return to office, which is happening as we speak. Fully remote work becomes completely normalized outside of emergency situations like the pandemic. And then once you have remote job as being the norm, which it kind of is right now, but let's say more entrenched, like a total victory, let's put it like that, of remote work. The victory right now is not total, it's partial, but it's there. Once you have total victory, then the next pattern is, of course, well, if I'm working remotely, if everybody's working fully remotely, everybody's going to eventually realize what you guys have already realized, and you're ahead of the curve, you're ahead of everybody. Is that, well, I can just like double my income by just working another job, triple my income by adding a third job, and no employer is going to be able to compete with that. I think maybe they surprise us all and they quadruple everybody's wages, I don't think so, but maybe. Never say never. But people are going to realize, like, wait, actually, I should go to the market and get triple the money for my, with my expertise, I can actually like get triple the money from whatever one employer is offering me. And so employers are eventually going to buck, because the economic pressures, the economic advantage of both remote work and job stacking are too powerful, right? Like if they want to get rid of one of them, like it's like they can't. Like, look, they've tried, and now they're losing people. Again, I'll show this, and I'll show this again. 2/3 some remote, 1/3 fully remote, 1/3 and decreasing fully in the office, right? And this is 4 years, 2 years, whatever, depending on how you want to count when the pandemic ended. Let's say 2 years, 2 years after the pandemic was over. So this is not an aftermath of it. All right, so this is another statistic. This is from This is from the state. This is from Insightful, the state of remote, the remote research report. Again, I'll have all the sources in a community post and a community feed post later. But here you can see kind of like the same pattern. It's basically like you can see that the math, like the statistics from different studies, kind of like they all fit. They fit the same pattern. Here we have 2/3 of employers surveyed saying if they're planning on permanently allowing remote or hybrid work. So here we go. Like we have the 2/3 here. Exactly, we have this 2/3 independent studies basically finding concurring on the same thing. And this is when numbers start, like lying with numbers starts getting a little bit harder, right? Like it also kind of makes sense with what I'm seeing and with what we're all seeing, and then with this other trend that I'm going to mention. This is from a Stanford study, which again a PDF. I'll upload the PDF to the community. But these this is this study also looked at remote work. They had different definitions. Instead of like defining things in fully remote or partial remote, they measure things in days worked remotely or days worked in the office. So it could be, right. So for instance, let me just go one by one, right? So this is from the Stanford study. The study is called, let me get the name. Hold on, I'm in notes here. The evolution of remote work by Bloom and Davis. I'll link that study to the community post later. Right. So these are some bullet points on the trends that they found while studying, remote work. The other thing about their study is that it looked at historical data beyond just the pandemic. So, like for instance, the second bullet point that says that the rate of remote work increasing, it doubles every 15 years. So the amount of people doing remote work doubles every 15 years since the introduction of the personal computer, of course. So you see that they went and looked at historical data beyond the last 4 years. And so they found that since the introduction of the personal computer, the rates of remote work double every 15 years. And so maybe this accelerates, and now they're going to double every 5 years, or maybe it's a little bit longer. I don't know. I think it's going to accelerate for obvious reasons, right? Like since the pandemic, in 2020, the last 4 years, the rate of remote work compared to 2019 more than doubled. So this is probably every 15 years is like the average historically now, but now it's probably going to double at a much faster rate. How much faster? I don't know. I think every 5 years or so. So this is part, like the two first bullet points are kind of like the historical trend, right? Again, this trend beyond the last 4 years, beyond COVID-19, this is historical since the introduction of the personal computer, since people being able, office workers being able to computationally work from home or work with computers from home, right? So remote work was on the rise even before the pandemic. So this is very important as well. Even before the pandemic, remote work was on the rise. So again, the pandemic catalyzed it. It was the greatest catalyst for remote work ever, but the trend was still that it was growing even before it, right? And so now, why would this have changed after the pandemic, right? Like, again, discounting the local minimum that we encounter of coming up from the peak, going down. Obviously, that was gonna, obviously it was gonna crash, right? But why would it regress? Why would it go back, or why would it stall even when it was doubling every 15 years before the pandemic, and it was on the rise before the pandemic, right? So it makes no sense to think that, oh, well, now remote work is over. It's like it's only over. It's like if you're like one of those people that say that Bitcoin crashed because it went from like $100,000 to $80,000 to $80,000, $60,000, and then like you're crying, oh, it crashed. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it was worth 1 penny, 10 years ago. Now it's worth 60,000. You're saying it crashed because it's no longer 100,000. So it's kind of like the same logic operating here, where people are like, there's never been more remote work, right? Like ever. And people are like, no, the remote work market crashed. Like it's over. There's no more remote jobs. And lastly, this other trend is that, and this is why I said that the study uses this, I wouldn't say weird, but like this interesting metric of like counting days worked remotely, right? And so they say the amount of days worked remotely should continue to grow in the future, reaching 30% to 40% of all work days being worked from home. So this doesn't mean that 40% of all jobs are going to be fully remote. It says that 40% of all work days in the year, so close to half of all year, is going to be worked remotely. This includes hybrid workers, and they're, even if you have one day, if you're hybrid and you only get one work from home day, they're counting that, right? But still, 40% of all work being done remotely. Again, the pattern is not that remote work is dying or that it's going away. The pattern is that it just keeps growing. It may take different forms, right? Like some people are going to get kind of screwed by hybrid arrangements, but the pattern is more work from home days, whether this means fully remote jobs or hybrid jobs. And then this is the final slide, which is the thing that I told you, like the numbers seem to be, the numbers are not in the abstract. They seem to be conforming to an observable reality, which is this, reality hits hard. If return to the office was succeeding, if remote work was retreating, and we were losing the war, then you wouldn't see this historical collapse of financial of commercial real estate, not financial real estate, commercial real estate, right? These are just a couple of like 4 headlines, but you're probably aware, like things like WeWork also collapsed, right? And then you have all this stuff of like, you have very real, this is reality, right? Like this is money. This is not like some manipulating some figures or whatever. This is like a pattern. This is why I said that if you actually read the media, you read between the lines what the media publishes, right? Between all the bashing of remote work, they publish, you see these headlines and you see like, oh, this is closer to reality than some like opinion piece about whatever is going to happen with remote work. It's like commercial real estate seems to be not recovering, seems to be, I dread using the word collapse so loosely because, again, like maybe, these are a couple of buildings, right? But the pattern is consistent, right? Like you see this in all over the country, right? Like if it was constrained to one city, right? Like commercial real estate in LA or in San Francisco was collapsing, then maybe you could say, well, it's something going on in those cities. But as you can see, we have, West Coast, East Coast, Midwest here, Chicago, New York, LA, Kansas City also had a huge. St. Louis had a huge, a huge problem with commercial real estate. You can just look, you can just research this stuff, right? Like you can just look at the headlines of these are very real news in a sense because you can't, I guess journalists can always say what you always take with a grain of salt what the media publishes. But what I mean is like you take the pattern as a whole. Again, like you have the numbers from the studies, and then you have this pattern in real life that's happening of the collapse of the real estate, of commercial real estate. And that tells you something, right? Like, it's like those two things give you the pattern that remote work is still the norm, or is still on the rise. Like, return to office did not win. It did not defeat remote work. Otherwise, you wouldn't see the numbers that you're seeing in those studies, unless they were like completely bold-faced lies, which again, maybe like I that this is why I don't, this is why I like, again, my data, my science, even though it's useful as a reference sometimes, but this is the entire pattern, right? Like you have reality hits hard, like you have this happening, and then you have the broader trends, which are not as easy to see, right? Like it's easier to see how when a building was sold at 75% discount than to see how many people are working fully remote, at a glance, right? And so with that, what I wanted to tell you is that, this is the end of the presentation. This was the last slide. With that, the conclusion is that don't get discouraged by the media, by the stories of remote work collapsing. Remote work is doing fine. Like it's growing. It's going to keep growing. It's getting harder to find a job for reasons unrelated to remote work, or to the collapse, or to the death of remote work. I guess I can get into it a little bit. The reason why it has become so hard to find a job, it's because the entire job market operates backwards. And I guess, I don't know if I should go into that. I want to keep it like constrained to the future of remote work. But yeah, for another stream, I'll explain what's happening. I'll give my full diagnosis of what's happening with the job market. But for now, I'll just say that the problem is not with the amount of jobs out there. From what I see, like there's new listings, new job postings every day. Companies seem to be hiring, but there's a disconnection between people, job seekers, and getting their resume seen, basically. And it's a problem inherent to the job market, because the job market operates backwards. So I guess very quickly, I'll just go over, like, in a regular market, you have buyers, who have money, and then in a market you have buyers with money. They're looking for things to buy, right? Like they may know what they want to buy, or sometimes they don't know what they want to buy. And then you have sellers, which may or may not have money, but what they have is a product that they want to sell. And so in a normal market, it's the sellers who would run marketing efforts, right? Like it's the sellers who would, on the internet, they would create ads. That's what I do. A lot of you are here because you clicked on an ad on some website or on a podcast, right? So it's the sellers, the people with a product to sell, the ones that engage in marketing efforts, right? To try to push their product onto somebody, right? Like to show their product to prospective buyers. And the buyers don't do marketing necessarily, right? So what's happening with the job market is that those roles are reversed. The buyers, which are the employers, are the ones running marketing efforts. They're the ones that have ads, like they're the ones saying like, hey, we're hiring, hey, we're buying. That's like going into a market and yelling, I'm buying. I have money to spend, and they're the ones with sales teams and catching leads, right? Like they're the ones with recruiters and employees, which should be the sellers. They're the ones that behave like the buyers, where they just kind of like casually stroll into the market to see what's for sale, what jobs there are out there, and they kind of make a bid on if they can buy the item or not, and then that's it. Like spray, they kind of spray and pray their bits, and so. It's this reason, right, that this inefficiency, and I'll explain why in the other live stream, but it's this inherent, and this is inherent. This has always been the case. It's just that the internet and AI mass apply tools have made it a million times worse. And so, but it's this inherent inefficiency, or this incoherence, right? That where you have a market where the buyers are acting as sellers and the sellers are acting like buyers, that is causing this collapse, or not, again, with the word collapse, this clogging of the job market, right? Here at the job site, at the job stacking team, we're working on fixing that issue on the employee side. Again, we're like employee centric. We're pro employee, any benefit to the employer is a happy accident. It's an accident, but a happy one nonetheless. So we're working on trying to get a solution from the employee side. But again, I wanted to constrain this to the trends in remote work, the future of remote work. So I'll leave it at this about the problems with the job market and why why people get discouraged and why you're not necessarily succeeding quickly, or a lot of the times the frustrations that a lot of you and not only you personally, but your friends, your acquaintances, your family members are witnessing, right? Like, it's an inefficiency with the job market itself, not the fact that remote jobs died or they got defeated.